Hi, everyone, and welcome back to. I think we finally have a name for this thing. Are we calling it Steven
Yeah, it was
Universe?
Panda and Alex revisit Steven Universe.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about the icon, the thumbnail, because I put it under Steven Universe Revisit. Remember?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, it's the full title is Alex and Panda Revisit Steven Universe, but on YouTube we're probably just call it Steven Universe Revisit because it's a lot easier to swallow.
Yeah, that's a better idea.
Yeah, but welcome back, everyone. Today's episode is season 1, episode 14, Laws and the Cool Kids. I'm Trans Panda, currently frontin' Helen. How do you doing? Don't you know? And this is Alex.
Hello, everyone.
Right. So today's episode starts off with the crystal gems coming across some sort of moss in it's looking like a pond if I'm not mistaken. But it's definitely dangerous to get around. It seems to be trying to grow onto anything that comes into the pond area, generally messing around and all that kind of deal. But we learned that this moss was planted by rose quartz up on a big old hill a distance away.
AKA the most important character in the show.
Yeah, remember that, kids. The mom's always the most important character, said the fictive of a mom. Anyway, but we see a little info on Rose secondhand through Pearl, talking about that Rose would care about even if something was gross or gnarly or uh, all nasty and what have you, she'd still care about it because it was a living thing. Uh,
I wonder if that was a thinly veiled comment about Greg.
I don't know, but we'll have to see.
It may have
It could
been.
have been. I don't know. I mean, like, if I were here, I mean, people are fascinated enough with the crystal gems on the other end. Imagine if there was a crystal gem fascinated with humans. Well, I mean, I guess it's mutual, so I'll go with that. But in the episode, they're wondering how to keep it away from, civilization and all that to make sure no one gets hurt. And Pearl gets the ingenious idea going into a stance, chanting as something emerges from her gem. It's police tape. And she goes, "Look, humans love to not go. Humans will just see this and walk away. It's brilliant."
that that joke aged very interestingly.
But yeah, and at that moment when they get all tied up and what have you, and Pearl puts the police tape in a bow, which I do think is cute, and Steven just says, "So, who's ready to eat?" "Just me then." And then he goes to the pizza place where he meets Lars, casually leaning against the side of the building with a jacket draped over his shoulder, doing nothing. And they talk a little bit, and Lars seems to be kind of anxious to go inside the pizza place. And the reason why is because he wants to hang out with the cool kids. And that would be three.
Jetty Pizza, Sour Cream, and Buck Dewey.
Yeah. Is her last name really Pizza?
Yeah, her name is Jenny Pizza.
Oh, well, I respect it. But yeah, basically Lars wants to get in with the cool kids this episode. And he's kind of doing that thing where when you try so hard, it ain't really working out too hot for you. Uh
Yeah.
Steven, being his young, more oblivious self, just reasonably goes up to them and goes, "Hey, Lars wants to hang out with you. Can we go to someplace together?" And the cool kids, possibly because the population of this town is probably like, I don't know, 200 at best, is that they just simply agree to drive around with Steven and Lars hanging out with them. Thus cuts like I wouldn't call them like visual gags, but they just sort of go around town seeing places that maybe they'll like, yes and no. But most of the answers from the cool kids are, I don't feel like it. Like Buck Dewey's dad, who's the mayor, going like, "You should re-elect me because I like to kiss babies. Ooh, there's a good baby." Mwah. Whatever the heck he was saying at that moment. Uh,
Yeah, that's basically what he
hmm
said.
And just about every time that they like comment on it, Lars tries to like chime in a little with his own like fancy quip, which typically, because he's trying so hard, just sort of makes the current kid who was commenting go like, I don't know, man, I don't really feel that, which just spikes up Lars's anxiety further. Then Jenny recommends they go to what was the name she gave the place? It was like Mouth something, right? Right.
I don't remember.
That's fair. Basically, the Jenny Pizza says like, "Oh, you know where we should go," and she lists like uh, a place that feels forbidden and stuff like that. And they drive there, and you can immediately sense the shift in the episode because all the color palettes immediately get desaturated, which is always fun. um, and when they
Yeah.
drive up to it, Steven realizes that this is where they put the police tape, and therefore this is where the absorbs you moss is. Steven, thinking like a child, goes like, "Oh, thank goodness there's that police tape there. Now they'll never go in." And then the teenagers immediately break it and go in anyway because they don't care. Uh, the cool kids give that vibe of that like very specific moment in your teenage age where it's like you're not inherently disrespectful, but you just don't care. You just don't care. And that's where they go in. Lars wants to hang out with the cool kids when they dive into the pond despite Steven's protests, and Steven holds Lars back just long enough to see the cool kids immediately get swallowed up by by all the moss, causing Lars to freak out and all that. And we get an interesting moment where Lars, finding out that Rose Quartz is the one who planned that moss, he blames Steven and Rose for this bad thing happening. And this is like, I think the first instance we've really seen Steven sort of snap at someone where he tells Lars off because, like, he didn't even get to know his mom because of the situation surrounding his birth. And yeah.
Oh, we should also
Mhm.
mention the moment when Steven tells Lars to basically bug off because he didn't know his mom. This is the first instance of the Steven and Rose Quartz relationship being called into direct focus by the show. And I think it is actually a very good moment to introduce this concept, considering where this relationship goes later in the series. The fact that it is very much an active relationship, despite one of the participants being dead, and it does leave Steven. It is the first time in the show that Rose's Quartz actions have been directly called into question and forces the audience and Steven to come to some not so friendly conclusions about Rose, which will come into which will really start coming into fruition later on.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I was thinking the point mainly was that Steven had finally has something that he's insecure about, and it's that he's not like he didn't get to know his mom, so like that's just kind of been a gap in his life that he's never been able to really address. Uh, but yeah, she did plant this moss and it is freaking out, so she is sort of responsible for it, but it's also a very distant sort of responsible. So we see how that carries out as the episode goes on, but
Oh, this episode is definitely does plant the seeds of the Stephen
Uh-huh.
and Rose
Uh-huh.
relationship.
That's okay.
In
Okay,
retrospect, it is extremely obvious.
uh-huh, yeah. Okay. Well, sorry, not being condescending. It was funny what you said. But
No, y'all have already mentioned that y'all haven't seen the show all the way through. But as
yeah,
someone who has their eyes opened, it just this stuff just becomes a lot more obvious when you do like rewatch the show,
all right, yeah.
which is a bonus of like rewatching series that you have done. Like sometimes it is healthy to just go back and rewatch something to get a fresher perspective if you don't feel like the first time you watched it you got the full picture. And coming back to it, like the show is definitely saying some not so friendly things about rose quartz in this episode that do get built on the more the show lives,
Interesting. This is why I
which is
only
funny because the fandom completely ignored it.
Yay, yippee! I again, I don't know. So I'm here just as.
It's better to not know, I think.
All right. Well, net zero gain for me. Well, not really, but you know what I mean. But basically, the episode goes on with Steven and Lars dragging the cool kids into the car and driving up to the hill that was mentioned at the beginning of the episode. And when they managed to drag there before getting completely covered in moss, the sun comes out and all the moss blooms into pretty pink flowers with, it looks like they have gems in the middle of them. And
They
yeah,
do.
they got gems in the middle and they float down to the ground all around. I didn't mean to rhyme there, but that's just how it is in this earth. And at that moment, because Lars and Steven helped, Steven says that Lars is the one who helped save the day and the cool kids. And Lars has some rep with the cool kids. And Steven and Lars feel like a little more understanding of each other. But Lars still like is insecure and squeaks out at the end when when the star wipe happens, and he goes, "Okay, that's enough." uh,
Yeah.
so this episode we mentioned before, but it feels like it does feel like it's planting the seeds of discussing about rose quartz, which we've discussed more in the past. How rose is definitely some sort of metaphor for a woman dying in childbirth. Uh,
It is pretty direct. I wouldn't even call it a metaphor. They just. Rose is straight up a woman who died during childbirth.
mhm. And a lot of, I don't know exactly how to put this, but like you said, I do appreciate how it feels like we are developing an aspect of like rose quartz, a relationship, even though she's not physically able to be present due to the
Yeah,
circumstances.
like Rose Quartz haunts Steven Universe. She is a perpetual ghost whose legacy and influence will lives with this show until its dying breath. Not to be dramatic, but Rose Quartz is genuinely that important to the framework of Steven Universe. And I think it is good for the show that it is bringing it up this early. Like
Yeah.
it's starting to really bring these themes into the forefront,
Hmm.
which is and and this is a good episode to do that because it beautifully intertwines the human plot with the crystal gem subplot, which is actually something season 1 is really really good at doing.
Oh, for sure,
Like
for
there
sure.
is a very healthy mix of like the world building of of Beach City and the world and the environment that the gems and humans interact in, and there's also a healthy mix of the crystal gem plots. The show in its first season is basically the only season that knows how to balance these things, because the more we move into Steven Universe, the more that this consistency is going to be thrown out. for better or for worse.
I'm excited to learn more about this.
Oh boy.
But yeah, it
I do
is.
have a feeling that a common thing we are going to say, like I said in the first episodes we recorded, remember how season 1 did this better? I feel like we're going to be saying that a lot.
We'll see. We'll see. I will be curious how it goes on upon revisit. Because it is true that these plots are being interwoven very, very well. Where I didn't even I thought about it when we started commenting, but I didn't even notice that like Pearl, Garnet, and Amethyst did not show up for the ending of this. Like they just did their part, and then they were out of the picture by the end of it. If you noticed.
Yeah, I noticed.
Yeah.
But it's good that y'all brought it up.
Yeah, and it kind of shows that like characters don't need to be 100% present in an episode to do the part that they should.
It's also good for like Steven's development as a character. Like it's clear that he is starting to grow past the crystal gems.
Mhm.
But the problems will start becoming more apparent once the show lives, and we will talk about that when we get to that.
Yeah, we'll see how it.
We have just simply mentioned that this is going to become a problem in the future. Now it's on to the show to live up to what it did.
Yeah. Some other comments we had. I did like the cool kids. They did remind us of just that extremely specific state you get in when you're a teenager. I don't exactly know how to describe it, but that awkward middle phase where just about everything that you used to enjoy is blasé. This is kind of picking up back on what was his name again?
Petey.
Petey. But like they kind of show that more acceptance of that, of trying to move on from it, but not quite being into adult things either. So the only thing you got is mild, inconsequential rebellion that probably hurts you more than anyone else.
Pretty much.
I think we didn't. It's not too obvious immediately, but I think Buck Dewey especially, you start getting these vibes of like, are these three kids modeled after the Crystal Gems? Because Buck Dewey is wearing basically the same shades that Garnet is, and
Yeah, sour cream has Pearl's
and
haircut, and Jenny basically acts like a diet light
I
amethyst.
guess that's fair.
Not to be dismissive of her character, I am just trying to simply summarize what the cool kids are going for.
Hmm.
It's clear by their presence in the show that the Crystal Gems have garnered a bit of a reputation around Beach City, if not for being destructive. Then their reputation is definitely they are much more highly regarded than we are led on to believe.
Hmm. Yeah. There isn't much that comes out of it. It is just sort of like a very casual element, and I'm not fully sure if it's confirming anything or if it's just like a happenstance little Easter egg to pay attention to. But I reoccurring themes or motifs or something definitely made me look, so I definitely didn't mind it. You think,
Oh, that's okay.
where else we come from? There was a little bit that I did sort of think was funny where the cool kids asked Steven where he got that killer shirt, and Steven just says that he has no idea where any of his clothes come from, which
Oh, that will come back in a future episode.
yeah, it probably will. It's just another
It absolutely
it's
will.
just another casual confirmation that this kid is, while we see him growing up, he's also still horrifically sheltered from the outside world, you know?
Yeah, that is his biggest problem as a character, actually.
Yeah, it's we'll see more of it, but I will say like yeah. For this episode we feel that it mostly touched upon Steven's like potential insecurity surrounding Rose, but also his optimism of like just kind of putting your foot forward or like appreciating things no matter what. Because even when he gets fed up with Lars, he wants to believe in Lars to a certain extent. And I'd say the other element of this episode is Lars sort of kind of the first time we see Lars sort of soften up a little around Steven and trying to be just a tiny bit better, because we sort of see that he is a little pathetic with how he's treated Steven in the past, and it seems to be that he has quite a few insecurities on like having attention or like being perceived as cool or stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
I yeah, I like this episode. I think it did its job well. I think it knew how to balance things well. And yeah, no, I liked it.
Okay, my notes. Rose quartz mentioned. Don't worry, we already had a big old long spiel about rose quartz, and I think you guys can already pick up on my feelings about rose quartz.
Hmm.
Lars's treatment. I suppose it's because Lars is being a little bit of a tryhard, and the cool kids said that they didn't like tryhards, or I believe a comment was made to that effect, but their treatment of Lars feels a tiny bit microaggressive. This isn't, I think, I don't mean this to think that the cool kids are bad people in any sense. It just is, it just does strike on a form of a teenage naivete that it's good that they're being honest, but the way that they're talking to him is not as eloquent or as uh they lack a lot of social tact, actually. They
Yeah.
actually have that much in common with Steven. Like, actually, Steven and the cool kids have this in common. They're not very tactful, which I think is good for these characters to be written in that way because of what they're trying to represent.
Yeah.
And Steven and Rose's relationship, which we already went into a big old spiel on. And the last thing I actually want to mention is the voice of Sour Cream.
Hmm.
Sour Cream is actually voiced by an actor by the name of Brian Posen, who is a main character on actually one of my favorite indie TV shows, Mission Hill.
Hmm.
It was created by Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein for the WB. Originally aired in 1999. The last episodes were burned off on Adult Swim. But the reason I mention this is because I think Mission Hill is a really good TV show, and I think y'all should watch it. You should watch Mission Hill.
Yeah.
You should watch Mission Hill.
Yeah, what are you
Okay.
doing watching us? Get out of here.
Watch Mission Hill. Okay. But the character that he voices is a guy named Jim. And I'll give a very, gentle description of Jim so that I don't spoil too much.
Mhm.
He's a very good friend of the main character. He is... Actually, the impression, what I get from Jim is that he was raised in very specific circumstances that put him in the position that he was in. He doesn't get much screen time in the show, but judging by the kind of lifestyle he has and the kind of people he surrounds himself with, he may have not been in the best position to make these decisions for himself. So it is good that Jim managed to surround himself with people who he feels understands him and who he feels that he can have a healthy and good relationship with, because if Jim went down a darker path in life, chances are he would have turned out to be a not so nice guy with a lot of money.
Hmm.
Okay, there we go.
I see. Well, that's interesting.
The show was canceled in its first season. There were even unproduced episodes, which is such a shame. But I do feel that if the show had lived, we might have gotten more insight into why Jim is the way he is, because for him being as young as he is, and for him to be surrounded by the people that he is, his life is genuinely interesting in a way that I would like to know more about him. I think the writers did a good job of setting up a character who has enough backstory to the point where you would want to know more about them and how they became that way, because people in Jim's position usually don't end up being so well adjusted.
I see. Well, that's interesting, and maybe I'll give it a look someday.
Someday.
Someday. But yeah. Uh yeah, you spoke your thoughts. I don't have much else to talk about.
Yeah, I went over everything.
Hmm. Well, I think that's all for us then, because
Oh, I'm gonna actually mention this. We have had plenty of we have had plenty of opportunities to talk about relationships on this show or shipping, but we are making the very conscious decision to not bring up any potential theorizing of relationships or relationships that could in theory happen. We have made the conscious decision to only talk about relationships canon to the show. You all are free to hypothesize about the relationships, but this podcast is only going to stick to the objective canon of the show for the most
I
part.
might bring it up once, and that's only because of it being relevant to uh a certain set of circumstances in some of the later seasons, to comment on something behind the scenes. But other than that, uh yeah, we're gonna keep it to mostly canon stuff, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's all for today, sweethearts. Do you have anything else to say, Alex?
Well, I've said everything, and I think we've accomplished our goals with this one pretty well.
Okie dokie. Well, it was wonderful recording this episode, everyone. Once again, I'm Trans Panda. You can find me on Tumblr under Trans Panda One, and you can also now find me on Twitter under Trans Panda Art for some reason.
All right. I'm Alex, and you don't want my social media.
Well, I think that'll be all for today. Bye bye, folks.
Okay. Good night,
Good
everyone.
night. Thank you for existing. If I could begin to be half of what you think of me, I could do about anything. I could even learn how to love like you.